All right, good afternoon, guys. Today we're going to go over a management supply chain management 3710 practice final exam. Now, before we get started, know that I am a student, I am not a professor, so take what I say with a grain of salt. Also, that this is a practice final exam, not the actual final exam. That being said, the midterms and finals do tend to be fairly similar to the practice exams because they share the same principles and it's just variations in the numbers and the wording of it. So let's get started. Question 1. In the network design problem, one of the constraints was that no facility can have excess capacity. Well, that's simply not true because every facility can have excess capacity. Having excess capacity is absolutely a constraint because it increases your holding cost. So this is false. Okay, now with question number 2. What does deseasonalizing a data set accomplish? Well, what deseasonalizing is rounding out the seasons so that you can see the general trend of the demand. So for example, in the summer, things like a swimsuit is going to be more popular. However, we don't want to know how the growth is from summer to winter. We want to know the general growth. So therefore, we want to remove that season-like pattern. So what's a season-like pattern? Well, removing the wave-like pattern is deseasonalizing. So total logistics cost. This is something that you're just going to have to remember, and it's 3 things. So if you ever see 2, you can immediately eliminate that. It's inventory, transportation, and facility. It does not have to do with distributor. So make sure you remember inventory, transportation, facility. ITF. All right, cash to case is the duration of time when the cash enters the process as cost to when it returns as collected revenue. Best in class performance on this metric is C2C, that is almost 0. So here's the trick with these true falses. A lot of times the first half is true, the second half is false. In this case, that's exactly what it is. Cash to case is exactly this process of when you put money in and how long it takes to come back to you. However, the best metric is not almost 0. Although almost 0 is probably a good metric, you can actually get a negative C2C, which means that you get paid before you create the product. So this is false. When faced with a network design decision, the goal of a manager is to design a network that minimizes the firm's cost while satisfying customer needs in terms of demands and responsiveness. Everything about that checks out. You want to minimize the cost. Why would you pay excessive for the same thing while satisfying the customer needs in terms of demands and how responsive you are? So, true. The goal of any forecasting method is so like we spoke about earlier, forecasting, you want to see how the demand is going to be in the future. So you don't want to see things like a random component of demand. You don't want to see those, so that's A and D eliminated. Predict the systematic component of demand, and yeah, it's most likely this. Predict the seasonal component. Well, no, with the forecasting, if you're doing it right, and it's a product that has variation between seasons, you want to deseasonalize it. So you don't want a seasonal component of demand, you want a systematic component. So question 7. Although faster transportation is more expensive, a firm which benefits as a result of the faster transportation... So which benefit as a result of the faster transportation? So what happens because there's faster transportation, essentially? Well, fewer rejects? No, not necessarily. Higher profits? It could be hit or miss because faster transportation does mean faster lead time, faster chance of the customers receiving the product, but not necessarily. Then we can go into lower inventories. Well, yes, that's the primary benefit of having a faster transportation, that you don't have to have as much holding costs. Room to hold stuff is expensive, so by having a faster way of getting stuff, you don't need to hold as much stuff. So lower inventory. Question 8. Which of the following is not a characteristic of a responsive supply chain? So which is a characteristic of a responsive supply chain? So within a responsive supply chain, you have factors like short lead time. Yeah, for sure, because you want to get the items fast. Flexibility. Yes, that's absolutely part of responsive, that they're able to meet the demands and meet any sort of changes that we might make along the way because it's such a innovative product. Buffer inventory to deal with demand and supply uncertainty. Yeah, for sure. That's certainly like the flexibility. And lastly, the lowest possible cost. So, yep, it's the lowest possible cost. Remember, for responsiveness, you're going to be paying big bucks because in order for them to be so responsive, you have to be paying a certain amount. Anything good and responsive usually is expensive. In order to increase the supply chain surplus, each firm in the supply chain must decrease its cost. Well, so this question is basically asking, what are the components of supply chain surplus? Well, supply chain surplus is two things, not just cost. It's actually customer value minus the cost. So if the cost decrease, great, but that's not the only way to make the consumer surplus greater. You can actually make the product's value greater. So this is false. A retailer has a 90% cycle service level. This means that if a customer walks into the store, there is a 90% chance that the item that they want is on the shelf. So, first of all, cycle service level. What is that? Cycle service level is the chance that the replenishment cycle does not have a stock out. So, the next order doesn't run out, essentially. And then fill rate, on the other hand, is what we're talking about here, where when you enter a store, what's the total chance that the store will have the item that you want? In this case, this is the exact example where they go into a retail store and there's a 90% chance that what they want is on the shelf. That's fill rate. So therefore, this is false because it's cycle service level and it doesn't match with this definition. Cycle inventory is the inventory that is held as a buffer against demand uncertainty. No, that's not true. Safety stock is that. Safety stock is the quote-unquote backup, or in their fancy terms, buffer against the demand uncertainty. So this is false. Pricing schedule with all unit quantity discounts encourages retailers to increase the size of their lots, which reduce the average inventory in a supply chain. So all unit quantity discounts encourages retailers to increase the size of their lots. For sure, that's definitely true, because if you get a discount, you're going to buy more, right? Which then reduces the average inventory in a supply chain. However, that part is not true. If you have more product, if you buy more product, everyone is forced to step up their game. And in terms, that does not mean that there's a lower average inventory in the supply chain. So that's false. Question 13. In the continuous review model, all the following reduce the amount of needed safety stock except. So which of the following do reduce the amount of safety stock? Let's look at that first. So if you reduce the lot size, does that decrease the safety stock? Well, no, that's actually the opposite. But let's look at the other options first. Aggregation of demand. So if demand is in separate regions now, then yeah, the safety stock would go down because it's more spread out, and therefore you don't need one place to have all the safety stock, all the inventory. Reduction in the replenishment lead time. Well, if the lead time goes down, then yeah, they would be more responsive, and therefore they would need less inventory on hand, and in terms they would need less safety stock. Reduction in CSL level. Well, yeah, that also leads to a decrease in the needed safety stock. So going back to A, it's definitely reduction in lot size. And if you just think about this logically, reduction in lot size means that you order less. If you order less, but you still have the same demand, then therefore you're going to need more backup because you're going to run out. So when you run out, you still need that same amount of safety stock. And in this case, we're looking for the except, so therefore it's reduction in lot size. Which of the following strategies help reduce the bullwhip effect in a supply chain by removing pricing obstacles? So what levels it out so that there isn't such a big variation in the supply chain? The bullwhip effect is essentially that you have retailers telling suppliers, telling manufacturers different information about how much stuff they actually need and how much demand there ultimately is. So what ways to minimize that misinformation from one step to the other? Well, short-term discount, no, that would actually increase bullwhip effect because all of a sudden there'd be a spike because it's a short-term discount. However, in the long run, we don't know what the actual demand is. Periodic review policy, no, it's not that. Sell-in incentive. So sell-through is selling to the customer. Sell-in is going the other way in the supply chain. So no, that actually, if there's an incentive to it too, that throws off the bullwhip effect. Anytime there's anything that relates to an incentive, you're likely to be in an issue where there's one group that is trying to change the actual demand in the long run, and they're trying to spike demand in the short run. So for example, if they gave bonuses to everyone if they made sales this quarter, well, that's a sell-in incentive, and therefore it'll increase the bullwhip effect. So we're left with everyday low pricing. Everyday low pricing, you might think, oh, low pricing, it's a bullwhip effect. However, you need to look at the everyday part. By having a consistently low price, you're making the demand as stable as possible. Question 15. A firm replenishes a SKU from its supplier using truckload shipping. The cost of the shipping does not depend on the size of the order. According to the EOQ model, okay, so this problem, the answer is goes down because of a decrease in cycle inventory. However, this is one of the problems that I had a lot of trouble in, so I don't feel comfortable giving you an answer. If you do find something, please feel free to leave that in the comment section below. Question 16. In a poorly coordinated supply chain, each firm tries to maximize its own profits, resulting in actions that often diminish total supply chain profit. So it's just like before where I talked about with the incentive and the local optimization, this is called, that within each section they're trying to change the demand, and therefore we don't ever really know what the demand is. So yes, this is true. This is an example of the bullwhip effect as well as local optimization. A company that tracks inventory and places an order for a lot size queue when the inventory declines to a reorder point is using, well, first of all, there's two sorts of review policies. There's periodic review and continuous review. So eliminated. Periodic review talks about a specific period. You're getting a shipment of, I don't know, you're getting a shipment of coffee once a month. Continuous review is when we reach a certain point, then you have to re-up and get more product. So it's continuous review in this point because there's talking about reorder point and places in a fixed inventory amount. In the continuous review model, the decision on when to place a replenishment order depends on all of the following except, so we just talked about this. With continuous review, there's reorder point, there's safety stock, there's demand, and there's lead time. So which are not talked about? I talked about safety stock, talked about demand, talked about lead time. It's this, it's the lot size. The lot size is fixed with continuous review policy. Question 19. The tactic of overbooking or overselling the available asset is suitable in any situation where customers are able to cancel order and the value of the asset drops significantly after a deadline. Well, this is true. You want to overbook things like a airline ticket or a hotel ticket. This is because it's an available asset only at that time. However, once it passes this time, you can no longer use or you can no longer benefit from that thing being empty. So, for example, if you own a hotel and you're trying to make sure that the rooms are selling out, it's because if you have an empty room there, that room is not going to make any money that day. And that value of that asset or that day where you can book the room is dropped significantly and straight up to nothing if you don't sell that room. So this is true. Question 20. Which of the following strategy to decrease the understocking cost? So be careful here. They're asking for decreasing the understocking cost. Well, understocking is when you don't have enough stuff in a store, for example. That's understocking. Overstocking is you have too much stuff in a store, essentially, and you can't sell all of it. So which are the representatives of this? Well, let's look here. Reducing the level of cycle inventory? Well, no, not necessarily, because if you reduce the level of cycle inventory, that is not... That is increasing understocking. If you have less stuff, you're going to have less stuff to sell. Selling unsold products to an outlet store. So although that sounds like a convincing choice, that's not. That's actually talking about overstocking. Because if you have too little stuff to sell, how are you going to sell unsold product? The whole problem is that you don't have enough product, not that you have too much product. Discarding the unused materials. So it could also sound like that, but it's not. So although that might lower... but even it might lower cost a little bit, but that's not a decreasing understock long-term solution. However, if you zoom out a little bit, arranging for backup sourcing, that definitely reduces understock. So understock happens in the first place because, like we said, we don't have enough stuff to sell. So therefore, if I find another guy to sell me something, then I'm more likely to have more product in hand. So therefore, arranging for backup sourcing makes the most sense here. A high level of product availability requires less inventory, which will keep costs down for the supply chain. A high level of product availability requires less inventory. That itself doesn't make sense, so that's false already. How can you have a high level of product availability and have less inventory? That itself doesn't make sense. You can't have things more available, yet you don't have the things. So, yeah. Question 22. Whether the optimal level of availability is high or low depends on a particular company's belief that they can maximize profit. So, yeah, that's true. That's pretty straightforward in itself. Question 23. Which of the following is not an example of differential pricing? So the trick here is there's differential pricing and there's dynamic pricing. Differential pricing is essentially, here's a price for students, here's a price for firefighters, here's a price for cops, here's a price for senior citizens, here's a price for adults from the age of 18 to 64 years old. That's differential pricing. Dynamic pricing is that you're changing the price due to a certain time. So like we spoke about with like a hotel. A hotel today, if you want a hotel tonight, it's going to be expensive. However, if you booked a hotel maybe 6 months in advance, then it's more likely that it's going to be lower cost. So if we look at these options, it's not an airline offers a more expensive ticket because this is differential pricing. You're differentiating the audience from first class and coach. An airline offering a cheap ticket that requires a 7-day minimum stay, knowing this appeals to only leisure travelers. So here's a trick in this. Although it has 7 days in it, which usually instantly means dynamic pricing, they're talking about leisure travelers. They're differentiating themselves. So there's leisure travelers and then there's business travelers. So you got to make sure that's you don't fall for that trick. A movie theater offers a student discount. Well, that's immediately differential pricing like we spoke about. So it leaves us with a car rental firm that makes more reservation than a number of cars knowing some will cancel. That is not an example of differential pricing. The presence of a buyback contract changes the buyer's understocking costs as compared to the case where there is no buyback. The presence of a buyback contract changes the buyer's understocking cost. Well, no, that's false because, look, if you're understocking already, there's no point of the buyback contract. If you don't have enough stuff. So first of all, you have to understand the two things. Understocking is not having enough stuff to sell even when people want it. And then buyback contract is like a supplier buying the stuff back if you have too much. So therefore, you can't have not enough stuff and at the same time sell back to the suppliers. So that's false. An increase in forecast accuracy. Well, if your forecast is more accurate, you want to have a more accurate stuff. So you're less likely to overstock, you're less likely to understock, and your goal with that obviously is to make more money. So how do you become more accurate? That's the answer we're looking for. In this case, it's decrease both the overstocked and understocked quantity and increase the firm's profit. So question 26. A high level of product availability requires blank, which raises supply costs. So which of these answers tells us that there's a high level of product availability? So understocking the product is definitely not. Reduce costs, no, that doesn't mean that the product is more available. If you increase revenues, no, that also doesn't necessarily lead to the product being more available. It's actually large inventories. If you have more stuff, the product is more available. Pretty common sense when you think about it like that. Question 27. A contract that allows a retailer to return unsold inventory up to a specified amount at an agreed about price this is a buyback contract. So like we spoke about, returning the unsold inventory to a specified amount at a certain price is a buyback contract. That's when things are overstocked. You have too many jackets, and that jacket, you can give it back to the supplier for a certain price. So question 28. Outsourcing delivery of a firm products to UPS is an example of, well, it's pretty obvious, transportation aggregation. That's transportation when it's UPS. So question 29. Markdowns that occur at the end of a selling season are an example of differential pricing. So like we spoke about earlier, differential pricing is like separating your customer group. So no, this isn't separating our customers groups. This is actually dynamic pricing because we're changing the price due to a certain time frame. At the end of the season, it's cheaper. At the beginning of the season, it's not marked down and therefore more expensive. So this is false. This is dynamic pricing, not differential pricing. As the ratio of the cost of overstocking to the cost of understocking gets smaller, the optimal level of product availability decreases. As the cost of overstocking and the cost of understocking gets smaller, the optimal level of product availability decreases. No, that doesn't make sense because, so basically, if you understock less and overstock less, then you should be more accurate. You should get a more realistic demand. So therefore, the product availability should be high because you're getting the perfect amount. You're not getting too much. You're not getting too little. So this is true. Question 31 is, a pair of headphones costs $10 to manufacture. Best Buy purchased them for $20 and ships them for $5. Best Buy sells the headphones to a customer for $80 who values them at $100. What is the supply chain surplus? Okay, so what is the supply chain surplus? There's a formula for this. and it is consumer value minus the cost to produce and deliver. So what do we already know? The customer values them at $100. Now we need to know the cost to produce and deliver. So what is considered a cost to produce and deliver? Well, the trick here is that it does not include this $20 that Best Buy pays the manufacturer. That's actually a price for Best Buy. That does not actually involve the product itself. So it takes $10 to make the product, $5 to ship the product. That's production and that's delivery. So therefore, SC equals 100, which is consumer value, plus the $10, plus the $5, and SC therefore is 85. Return to the previous question. What is the consumer surplus? Now, similarly enough, there's a consumer surplus, right? Consumer surplus is the value minus the actually paid. So we talked about the value before, which is the $100. They value them at $100. They actually paid $80 for them. Best Buy sold it for $80. So therefore it's simply CS equals 100 minus 80. So that's $20. Now, question 33. SKU number A123 is restocked with the following policy. Order 1,000 units. Every time the inventory drops to X units, if the daily demand is 20 and the lead time is 6, what should X be to ensure a safety stock of 100 units? So first of all, we're trying to find X. And what is X? X is the reorder point. Reorder point in the system. So because when it drops to this point, we want to get more. So therefore, we need to get that formula out, which is safety stock is equal to ROP minus demand times lead time. So this is the formula, and with the stuff that we know already, we know the safety stock is 100. Reorder point is what we're trying to find. Demand is 20, and the lead time is 6. So if we put all these together, the 100 safety stock, the reorder point minus 20 times 6, so therefore 100 equals ROP minus 120, and if we add 120 to both sides, you get 220 equals the reorder point. So 220 here. Return to the previous question. What is the average cycle inventory? So be careful with this question. They're asking for average cycle inventory. They are not asking for total inventory, because total inventory is this. Total inventory equals average cycle inventory plus safety stock. These are two different things. So make sure you actually get the average cycle inventory. We can get this by average cycle inventory formula is quantity divided by 2. Our quantity in this case is the 1,000 units that we order every single time. So Q divided by 2 equals 1,000 divided by 2 equals 500. So average cycle inventory is 500. Now, question 35. A store orders ski parkas in October for the selling season, which lasts from December to February. The store pays $80 to the manufacturer for each parka. During the selling season, they sell the parkas for $200. After the selling season, they sell the parka for $50 each. What is the unit overstocking cost? So first of all, let's write out unit overstocking cost is the goal. And to find that, the formula for overstocking is that cost per unit minus the salvage value. Remember, overstocking is, oh shoot, we ordered too much and now we can't sell all of our product. we still have product that is unsold. So therefore, the cost per unit that we bought it for is $80, minus however much we can sell it back to, which is the buyback contract, is $30. So if we overstock, we lose $30 per unit. What is the understocking cost? So similarly, understocking has its own formula as well, which is the retail price minus our cost. The retail price is $200. The cost we bought it for is $80. So $200 minus $80 is the understocking cost of $120. Sorry. So that's the understocking cost. Now, question 37. Return to the previous question. The store orders a quantity of parkas that is designed to maximize its profit according to news vendor model. Assuming they do so, what is the probability that they have any parkas left at the end of the selling season? Well, they're asking for the critical ratio in this point. Whenever you see news vendor model and however much that they have left and a probability, you're going to get critical ratio. So critical ratio is essentially the understocking divided by understock plus overstock. So fortunately, we already solved this. I'll also give you another formula actually, just so it makes more sense logically. Your profits divided by profits plus loss. In this case, we already have both of these. Our understocking value is here. So 120 divided by understock again, 120 plus overstock, which is the 30. So 120 divided by 150 equals, and let's just do that math real quick. 120 divided by 150, and you get 0.8. So in this case, not a percentage. They want a specific number. So 0.8 is your answer there. Now, the last question. Return to the previous question. If the mean demand is 1,000 and the standard deviation is 300, how many parkas should they order? Well, now that you have all that information of the critical ratio of being 0.8, you have to use that number and plug it into the normal distribution z-score table. Whenever you see demand, standard deviation, and you're given a critical ratio, that's what you do. So pull out that normal distribution z-score table. You should be given this already on the exam if you're taking this in person. And then now we have to look for a number that represents 0.8 as close as possible. So over here, 0.5s, 0.6s, 0.7s, there's 0.8s here. So if we look carefully, which is the lowest 0.8? So right here is the in-between between 0.799 and 0.802. So in this case, we take this. So this number that we need now, which is the z-score, is 0.8, we can see on our left, and then 0.05. So it's 0.85, z-score of 0.85. So now that we have that information, we also want to type out the information that we already were given. So demand is 1,000, standard deviation is 300. So now to find out the quantity, or how many parkas should they order, the quantity is the mean plus the z-score times the standard deviation. Now Q equals the quantity, which is 1,000. I'm sorry, Q equals Q equals quantity, but right now we're talking about the mean, which is 1,000, plus the z-score of 0.85 multiplied by the standard deviation, which is 300. Now, if we do that math, we can do 0.85 times 300, and then you add 1,000 on top of that. And now you have 1,255. Now, that is the entire practice exam. I want to reiterate one thing. I want you to actually try to do these problems on your own and then have me as the revision to it or an explanation to certain problems that you don't understand. I'm not recommending that you just copy this. I'm recommending that you try it and do it for yourself and really understand the concepts. So let's see what our results are. And just like that, 292 out of 300. So we did miss one thing. So let's see if I can correct that real quick. So this question was, as the ratio of the cost of overstocking to the cost of understocking gets smaller, the optimal level of availability decreases. Well, we actually talked about this. So think about it. If overstocking and understocking gets smaller, you should be more accurate. And therefore, the product availability should be high. It shouldn't go down. If you're more accurate, you should be spot on. So in this case, the fact that it decreases is false. It doesn't decrease. If anything, it increases to where it's perfect and closer to optimal. I explained that right, but I answered that wrong here. So that's my justification. And yeah, everything else seems right. So thank you for watching, guys.